Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be going over an introduction to functions. So in Python, what is a function? A function is a block of code that performs a certain task. And a function will only run when it is called. And I'll show you how to do that in the next couple of slides. So functions are really useful in Python because they help with code organization. Because we can store a bunch of different code statements or tasks inside one function, this can help reduce repetition or redundancy in our code. So instead of having to type out the same thing multiple times, we can just use a function in place of that, which makes it really reusable and easy to use in our code. So this diagram here shows the anatomy of a class. So if we look over here, I have a function here and it's called greeting. And in this greeting function, I basically have these three statements here. Each statement basically prints out a little greeting about a robot called Wally. So looking at this, we can see that we have defined the function using this keyword def, so define, and then the name of our function followed by these two parentheses, and then we have our semicolon here. And then after that, we have our docstring. So docstrings are basically these special comments that are used for functions, and then they basically tell the user or the coder what the function does. So here I just said this function prints out 3 different lines to introduce Wally. And then here I have my statements. So these were the tasks we were talking about in the previous slide. So these just print out little statements about the robot that we're talking about. And then here, this part is pretty important. This is the function call. So I just have the name of the function along with the parentheses again. And we'll talk more about why this is important in the next slide. But we have to remember to use this. And then here I have my output. So if I were to run all of this in my code console, I would get this output out. So it just printed out our 3 statements. Because when I have my function call, I'm basically telling the code to print out everything in that or do all the tasks in that function. So here when I call the greeting, it's going to go to my greeting function and then just do whatever tasks they are. So here the tasks were to print out these 3 statements, and that's exactly what I did over here. Okay, so now let's look at call and response. So we saw in the previous example, this is the same screenshot, we had our function call and we had greeting, which is the name of our function, along with our parentheses. So that's our function call. And then we saw that we got the correct output when we called our function because we wanted all of these statements to get printed out. So when I called my function, I'm telling the code to go to this function greeting and then do all the tasks inside greeting. So I called greeting, and here I see there's 3 print statements. So that's exactly what was executed out here. However, if I forgot to call my function or if I didn't do it, you can see that nothing's going to get printed out. And it's important to remember that functions will only do what they're meant to do and give you the correct output if you remember to call them. So if you don't call them, they're never going to run. And that's kind of what's great about functions, because you can call them wherever you want in your code, and that helps with your organization and helps you reuse code pieces. So you won't have to print out these same 3 statements every single time you want to do a greeting. You can just type out your function call and it would do that for you. So something that's really important to note about functions are the return versus print keywords. So here I have 2 screenshots. They are of the exact same function, except both of them have some really small differences. So here you can see that in this first screenshot I said return total, and here in this screenshot it says print total. And you can also see that based on the differences here, my function call kind of changed as well. So here it says print and then my function call with the name of the function and the parentheses, and here it just has the name of the function and the parentheses. So yes, there is a small difference here with whether I use return or print. So we'll look more into that soon. So let's just look at what this function does. So here I imported random, and then I have defined this roll2dice function. And then what it looks like, what I've done here is I simulated rolling 2 different dice. So this is my first roll, and then I generated a random number between 1 and 6. And in my second roll, I've done the same thing again. And then I just added up those 2 rolls together to get my final answer. So basically I've simulated rolling 2 die. And then what's really great is that there is a docstring here. So let's just read this. It says, this function generates a random number for the first row and another random number for the second row. Then both numbers are added together. Okay, so as you can see, the docstring really helped to tell us what this function does. So remember to add docstrings when you write your own functions. So now let's look at the difference between return and print. So I'm going to open up the code file over here. Okay, so let's just change this so it says print total, just because that's what we saw in our very first example with the greeting. So let's just say print total. And then when we print the total, we'll just call our function like we normally do, just with the name of the function and those two parentheses. So let's run this, and you can see I got my generated number, so it's 11. And then the reason why this works is because if you recall, we called our function here, so we called roll2die or dice. So the code's going to go back and look at that roll2dice function, and it's going to print, or it's going to do all the tasks that are inside that function. So here it's going to generate those two numbers, and it's going to add them up and print them out. So that's what's happening here. However, if I were to change this to return, if I change it to return total and try to run this, I don't get anything here. And the reason for that is because, again, I'm calling this function here. So I'm going to do all the tasks inside here. So I generate my numbers, I add them together, and then I return the total. I don't print it, I return it. So because I'm returning it, that's not the same thing as print. That's just going to store that value. So nothing's going to get printed to our console. However, if I wanted this to be printed out, what I can do is put print around the statement. So if I put print around this, and then I try running this, you can see that I will get my number printed out. And that's because, again, I called roll2dice. It's going to go through here. It's going to find this total. It's going to return that total. It won't print it. It'll return it. And then here, since I have print wrapped around my call statement, it's going to print out whatever value that was returned. So it's going to print out 3. So again, you want to be careful with whether you use print or return. Print will actually get something to your console, return won't. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, so you can see how that drastically changed our output. So you want to be careful of that. So that is it for today's video. Next video, you guys will be learning about parameters and arguments. So thank you for watching.